How you doing, everybody? It's me, it's the Wolf, and as you can see on the screen, I'm gonna give my 2 cents on Avengers Endgame. I went and saw it, well, last night into this morning. My was there from 11:20 till 2:30 in the morning. Boy, it was a long freaking movie. But I'm up, I'm awake, I've had some time to think about this. Now, I am not really gonna go in chronological order here, guys. I'm just going to go by characters and tell you what happens to them piece by piece. Now, this will have lots of spoilers. There will be spoilers everywhere. So, if you don't want to know about the movie, do not listen after I tell you when we dive into spoilers. All right, guys? So, you have been warned. Now, my overall impression, this was a 4 to 4.5 out of 5. 80 to 90% out of 100. This was a solid, good movie. Now, there are some problems with this movie, but it's not offensive and it doesn't completely insult my intelligence. Now, if you want a better in depth review, go check out other people, guys. I'm just going to say that right now. But this was a good ending. But it has the problem when you're trying to pick up off a cliffhanger. There is lots of expository dumping. That's the problem with this movie. It drags on in places. It was very funny in a lot of places. It was emotion driving in other places. And yeah, I mean, this character right here, I thought she was going to run away with the show and turn it into Captain Marvel Mark II, but she didn't. Just so you know. Everybody gave spectacular performances, the cinematography, the directing, the sound score, all of it was good. You got some really great things that happen. And now I am going to put down the spoiler warning. Spoiler, spoiler, spoiler. You all have been warned. Let's dive into it. Now, like I said, I'm going to be breaking this down mostly by characters. All right, first off, we are going to talk about Brie Larson. Yes, in this, she is pretty much the same Captain Marvel as you saw from the video. She is overpowered as all hell. She is this. She is the Marvel universe of Superman, and it shows. But unlike Superman, she just does not have the character to back it up. She only is in about, let's see, she's in about the first 20 minutes, maybe. Then she's in another scene when they have a time skip, because there is a 5-year time skip in the about first half hour of the movie. She is there because in this time before the time skip, they she like if everybody remember that trailer where Tony Stark's talking about Air's running out all that and we're wondering how the hell he's going to survive. Well, Deus Machina Captain Marvel. She saves him, drags him and Nebula back to Earth. Tony is about on death's doorstep, so they heal him up. They put him under, they heal him up, they get him fed, all that fun stuff. And then they go off to space to find Thanos because he's used the stones. They go down. She goes, does a forward recon, finds that he's alone. They go down, confront Thanos. She basically restrains him along with the others, and comes to find out after Thanos did his first snap, 2 days later he did a second snap and snapped the stones out of existence. It like literally burned his arm and half his face because of that power usage. Well, everybody loses hope. Thor cuts his head off, and then we go into the time skip. Now, kind of a bad shot, but yes, we do get the newer SJW look of Captain Marvel with the short hair. Now, this is going to sound really crazy. I actually liked Brie Larson a lot better with the shorter hair than I did the longer hair. She does a few other things, like during the last fight, she takes out Thanos' battleship basically single-handedly, and then she dives into the melee that's going on between Thor, Captain America, and Iron Man versus Thanos. She jumps in and she is literally restraining Thanos single-handedly from snapping his fingers again to completely recreate the universe. But this isn't the Thanos they just killed. This is 2014. You're 2014 Thanos. There's a lot of time things, so I'm just going character by character. It's going to sound a little out of order. But she is stopping 2014 Thanos, because of time manipulation that's going on, from snapping his fingers again and recreating the universe. Because in his mind, Thanos they killed failed. But he literally stops her from snapping his fingers, is literally about to break the gauntlet, and then one of the best scenes with her, which was basically Thanos pulls out the Power Stone and galactically bitch slaps Captain Marvel into a hill, and she's pretty much out of the fight. But overall, she really wasn't that preachy. She was just more annoying and overpowered, and it's just like the Marvel people just gave her too much and made her too perfect, and it shows. Okay, now we gotta talk about Ant-Man, because in my humble opinion, it's just my opinion, he's one of the major heroes of the show. He is one of the major story vehicles of this movie. Without him, you don't have a plan to take out Thanos. Basically, if y'all remember from the end of Ant-Man and the Wasp, he gets trapped in the quantum zone. Now, when the 5-year time skip happens, basically a mouse comes in the back of the comes in, hits the machine, turns it on, and he comes flying out of the quantum zone. For him, it was 6 hours. For everybody else, it was 5 years. Hence, quantum time, people. Now, some really funny stuff happens with him. Basically, they're trying to figure out how to use quantum time, and they send him back and forth to the Pym particles he has left. First, they send him back. He ends up as a teenager. They send him back again. He ends up as a 93-year-old man. They send him through the portal again. He ends up as a infant. And then he brings him back, and he has this great line of, I don't know if it was infant me or old man me who pissed my pants. Maybe it was just me. I don't know, but it was really funny. Then they go to Tony Stark, ask him, and we'll get to Tony Stark in a minute, but just needless to say, he figures out how to control it. But without Ant-Man, this whole story falls apart, and yes, it's all about time. Basically, the basics of the plan is they go back in time, various points of history when they know the time of all 5 stones in the Infinity Gauntlet are. They go back and they steal. It's basically a time heist. They go back and steal the stones back then. But instead of changing the present as it is, as you can't change it, it basically just creates alternate realities. So to fix that, they just take the stones back maybe a second or two later from when they took it, put it back, and everything merged back into one time stream. But without Ant-Man, there's no saving anybody. Ant-Man is literally the reason. So don't worry about Captain Marvel in this movie. Ant-Man and Tony Stark are the two guys who literally figure this out. I mean, Hulk / Banner helps, but it's really Ant-Man and Tony Stark. So, all right, now we got to talk about Hawkeye, since we're going to start talking about the main Avenger cast. Basically, the movie starts with him. He's at a cookout at his house. You know, he has an ankle bracelet on. That was his agreement. He's teaching his little girl how to shoot a bow. It's a lovely story. And then the finger snap happens and his family disappears. Basically, Hawkeye loses it. And during the 5 years, he basically just goes on a vigilante rampage, killing all the bad guys. Nat talks him down, talks him out of it, and gets him to help. Now, I will talk about him and Black Widow kind of together, because they go for the Soul Stone, because basically when they do this whole time thing, they go back to year 2014 and they go hunting for the Soul Stone, while War Machine and Nebula, they go for the Power Stone. They basically knock out Peter Quill, and you get the whole scene of him dancing through as he's going to steal the stone. They basically knock him out, take the stone, but Nebula will come in later. I didn't have the picture up for Nebula. I forgot to grab one. Damn it, but I'll talk about her when I get to the end. But him and Black Widow come to the Soul Stone, and remember what happens between Gamora and Thanos. Thanos had to sacrifice Gamora. Basically, to get the Soul Stone, you have to give up a soul. So, yes, this is our first casualty. Black Widow dies. And she ain't coming back. There's no time going back. They even have this discussion later after they all kind of come back after getting their respective stones. And it's like, no. Black Widow, KIA. She ain't coming back. She and Vision are done. Basically what happens is both of them are thinking about who's going to make the sacrifice, and they actually have a scuffle over who's going to do it. But in the end, Black Widow, as Barton / Hawkeye's jumping over the cliff, locks on his harpoon, throws it into the cliff, locks it onto him, and she's trying to fall. Barton catches her. They have a tearful thing, and he's refusing to let go. So basically, she swings them towards the mountain. Back jumps away. Barton loses his grip, and she falls to her death. And Barton comes back with the Soul Stone. But yes, Black Widow makes the ultimate sacrifice to get the Soul Stone, because it's basically, we have to get these stones at any cost. It was sad to see her go out like that, but it was bound to happen. Hawkeye, in the end, he does his thing. He helps guard the Infinity Stones once they get them all back later in the story, because Tony makes a replacement Infinity Gauntlet out of Iron Man tech. And after they snap everybody back, and I'll get to the Hulk story, he's running around with it for a while, and then when the main fight kicks off, since Hulk, when he snaps back everybody into existence, when I get into the Hulk, everybody comes back, a big fight ensues. He's running around with the gauntlet, he's trying to keep it safe, and then it's basically keep the gauntlet away from Thanos' forces, because he unleashes the Chitauri once again. But since everybody came back, it's basically the Wakandan forces, the who's who of who got snapped out of existence came back for the fight, including Doctor Strange, all of them. It's a great fight at the end. But yeah, Hawkeye story, he goes back to his family. He has a nice wrap up. He's one of the 3 still walking alive who can still fight as an Avenger. Like, what is that? Okay, now, Bruce Banner / Hulk. Basically, during the 5-year time jump, after, Thor beheads Thanos in their time, Banner basically stays in a Gamma facility for 18 months figuring out, and he basically becomes Bruce Banner with the Hulk's body. Gets the brawn and the brains, and he is completely cognizant of himself. He doesn't switch back and forth. It's really funny. When they finally do get all the stones, which I'll talk about later, I mean, they got the Soul Stone, they got the one from Peter Quill. Thor, when I talk about his story, they go get the stone during the events of Thor not Ragnarok, Dark One. But Hulk goes back with Captain America, Ant-Man, Iron Man, and they go get the Tesseract and the Mind Stone out of the scepter Loki was using during the Battle of New York. You get to see that, but from different aspects. You get to see some things that happened after the battle's over, right before Thor took Loki back to Asgard. He actually goes after the Time... Oh, I forgot also the Time Stone. And he has a meeting with the Ancient One that was played by Tilswith, the one that was had the Time Stone before Doctor Strange, and he convinces her to give it to him. He's also the one who puts on the Infinity Gauntlet first and snaps everybody back to existence. He tried to bring back Romanoff, but the stones wouldn't let him do it because she wasn't snapped out of existence. But he is another one who survives, though at the time his entire right arm up to his neck and almost partway up his face is burned badly. So he's walking wounded, but Bruce Banner / Hulk does survive. And it was touching that he tries to snap first, because he basically says all the stones are based off gamma radiation. He's about the only one who could do the snap and actually survive it, which is true. He does live through it, though it does cost him. But really good acting. His part was amazing. I mean, everybody had their moment to shine. That was the great thing about this movie. Oh boy, Cap. A lot happens with Cap. First things first, I'm just going to get the white elephant out of the room. Yes, he does. When Thor goes back to get the red stone, I can't remember which stone it is, but he basically goes back to Asgard when Jane's been infected with the stone. Thor brings back Mjolnir, and he also has Stormbringer. So at one point he's fighting Thanos with both. He loses Mjolnir. And then suddenly you see Mjolnir fly and smack Thanos in the head. And you see Thor look over and he's grinning. The hammer goes back to Captain America. Captain America was able to wield Mjolnir. He was even able to call lightning with it. Now, yes, everybody says, but what about Thor? That kind of steals from Thor. Thor doesn't need a weapon to call lightning, but Mjolnir, in and of itself, was able to call lightning. But the hammer considered Captain America worthy to wield it. And boy, does he do a great job with it. And there's this funny scene where they're in the middle of the main fight. Thor and Captain America are both striking people, and they both reach out and call back. Stormbringer goes to Captain America, Mjolnir goes to Thor, and Thor stops and goes, no. That's mine. You get the small one. Captain America just takes Mjolnir, goes, whatever, and goes back to the fight. It was really funny. The Captain America, his story is epic. On top of going back to the original Avengers movie to try to get back the Tesseract, well, something happens where basically Hulk was coming down the stairs. He bursts out. Tony Stark had the Tesseract. Gets knocked flat on his ass, loses the Tesseract. Loki, who's sitting there caught, picks up the Tesseract and disappears. But they do have the Mind Stone. So they give Paul Rudd, a.k.a. Ant-Man, the Mind Stone and basically goes, go back. We're going to go back further and go get the Tesseract. And Ant-Man goes, well, what about pin particles? You only got one more shot. And Tony goes, I know what to do. Now, if you all remember for Captain America Civil War, there is this base that Captain America and Black Widow go to that had a shield lab and all that in there. Well, they go back to that shield lab in 1970. Tony and Captain America does. Now, Tony's part, I will talk about that later. Basically, Tony goes to find the Tesseract in 1970. Captain America goes to find pin particles. Now, he basically almost runs into MP, so he ducks into an office. It happens to be Peggy Carter's. So, damn it, I want to picture the Peggy. It's not working. But anyways, he sees Peggy in 1970, and right then and there, okay, eventually at some point, he's going to go back. And he does, but not before he has the fight of all fights. He does his leadership thing. He's the captain we all know and love. Tony gives him back the shield. Thanos actually breaks his shield. I mean, practically shatters it. I mean, he's wailing on the vibranium shield. But he also does wield Mjolnir. He has an amazing fight. And at the end, when Tony does his thing, which I will get to when we get to Tony Stark, but he leads the forces to a triumphant victory, and then it comes time we have to put the stones back to where they were, so he gets back in one of their time suits and goes back. It's like, for us, how long it ever takes. For us, it'll be 5 seconds. Well, the 5 seconds go by, and everybody goes, wait a minute, where's Cap? Where's Cap? He missed his window, and everybody stops, and they see an old man sitting out by the lake because they're at Tony's place. Well, it's this man. Old man Steve Rogers. Basically, Steve decided, he took Tony's advice and he decided to, go back to the past. Probably sometime right after World War II, he walks into Peggy's house and has the dance he promised with her. And he decided to live out his life in the past and live with Peggy Carter. Which, it's a good send-off, and it does tie off that Chris Evans probably won't be back as Captain America. So he survives, but is basically retired. He has a nice scene with Sam, and he passes on the Captain America shield and title over to Sam. So it's basically tying off that Captain America, as far as Steve Rogers is done. But it was a good story for him. Okay, now we're doing Thor. Now we go to Thor. In the beginning, as I've said before, Thor basically kills Thanos. He basically beheads him after he finds out the stones. Then we get old man Thor. If you get over here, that's Thor. Basically, he loses all hope and basically drinks himself stupid. He gets fat, he gets slovenly. I mean, this is him when he's in Asgard. He's just a freaking wreck. But anyways, Thor ends up a wreck and a slovenly mess, but he goes back with Rocket, as you can see over here, to go to Asgard to get the Relativity Stone, I think it is, the red one that's in Jane. He sees his mother, he has a tearful reunion with her, basically gets told, go be yourself, stop being the slob, basically, and right before Thor leaves, he calls for Mjolnir and goes, haha, I'm still worthy, and then they go back in time, and that's how Cap gets the hammer. Uh, the fat gig was funny. The fat slob drunk Thor. In fact, he looked at one point like the Big Lebowski for about 5 minutes. It was funny for a while, and then it just got old. Thor kind of got gypped on this, but he still had his good moments. But Thor, for the most part, was a side character, especially with how fat and slovenly he was. And at the end, he basically went off with the Guardians and was having a tit for tat with with Star Lord, which was kind of funny. So we don't know if he's going to end up in Guardians or not, but Thor does survive. He is fighting capable. He might be in Guardians of the Galaxy 3, and there's really not too much for Thor. I mean, he's in that, right before the main battle kicks off, that, basically 3-on-1 brawl versus Thanos, and he does okay, but does get his ass kicked a bit. All right. This is the main hero of the movie. And yes, spoiler, at the end of the movie, Tony dies. But he goes out like a boss. Also, you will see Pepper in her rescue outfit, and Tony and her do some tag team fighting, and she is freaking awesome. And you have little Morgan, who is their daughter. But, going back to Tony. Basically, he gets, like I said, rescued by Captain Marvel. He basically says, screw it, I'm done, and was so sickly because they'd basically run out of food and water that he was basically sidelined. And then in the 5-year time gap, he has his daughter with Pepper. He's living out in a little house by the lake, but he does figure out the problem that Cap and the rest have of trying to figure out time. He has this great thing with Pepper of, I could take this idea because I figured out how to do the time thing. I could chuck it in the lake and forget about it. We could just move on. And Pepper goes, yeah, you could, but would you be at rest? And you just know Tony's going back. He helps him figure it out. He goes with Cap and the rest to go get the Tesseract and the Mind Stone. Fails at that, and then, like I said, had to go in the 1970s. Tony has a great moment because he goes to find the Tesseract and he runs into his father, Howard Stark. And it's like Howard's wife, Tony's mom, is in labor with Tony. And they're talking, and Howard Stark asks Tony, who Tony basically says, yeah, my name's Howard. Potts. And it's like, hey, Potts, tell me this. You have a daughter, right? Because Tony had mentioned he had a daughter. It's like, how did you deal with it? It's like, I kind of just made it up as it go along. And, he kind of reconciles with his father, even though his father doesn't know it. And he gets to understand that even though his dad was hard on him, everything he did was for Tony's good, and Tony finally gets to see that and understand that, and it's a great reconciliation for Tony. And then, of course, when Cap gets the Pym particles, they go back, they find out Romanoff is dead, they get the finger snap, and then the final battle happens, and of course, he's going toe-to-toe with Thanos. The main battle happens, he teams up with multiple Avengers. I mean, the fight is just one of those historic fights. And there's this great scene when all the Avengers first come back. Stark flies over to Doctor Strange. Hey, you said there's this one time, and Strange goes, I can't tell you right now, or it won't happen. Just trust me, it will win. And then he has a little tearful reunion with Peter Parker. He actually hugs Parker, even though he doesn't like hugs. Peter's like, oh, okay, this is good. It was so funny, and we get towards the end of the fight. Thanos is about to snap. Captain Marvel's been knocked out of the fight. And then Strange looks at Tony, just holds up one finger. This is the one time. And Tony gets the message of, oh, well, it's time to make the sacrifice play. Basically, he goes back in one more fight with Thanos. Thanos is about to snap. Tony grabs onto the Iron Man gauntlet they're using as the Infinity Gauntlet. Thanos goes to snap. Nothing. Tony's sitting there going, "Hey, you looking for these?" And basically, all the Infinity Gauntlets basically form into his Iron Man matrix. You can see the power surging through him. He's barely holding on. And Thanos looking, and Tony just goes, "I am Iron Man." Snap. And he snaps all of Thanos and his forces out of existence. Thanos basically watches all of his forces disappear. And he basically just sits down, kind of like he did in Infinity War, and he just sits and waits. And then fades away. Battle over. Tony is barely hanging on at this point. He gets set up. Peter comes over and tells him we won, we did it. He has this tearful moment, kind of holds on to Pepper, and then Pepper comes over, has her little moment, and says, "It's okay, Tony, you can rest. We're going to be okay." And then Tony passes. The final part is the funeral for Tony Stark. You get a little message he recorded right before they went on the time heist for his daughter. There's a little moment with Happy and Tony's daughter Morgan. And then you kind of see life going back on. And that's when, you see Thor go off with Star-Lord and the rest. You see Peter going back to school, which is going to lead into Far From Home. Basically people are breaking back up to go back to their lives, remember who they've lost. And everybody wasn't brought back at the time they disappeared. They were basically brought to the 5-year time jump and brought back at that time. So for everybody who was gone, they all lost 5 years. Everyone they else knew was 5 years older. Like, for example, when Ant-Man disappeared, his daughter was a little girl. Well, now she's basically a teenager. I mean, they had a tear for you when he came back from the Cosmic Zone. Nebula. Nebula has a really great arc. We get to see Gamora again, but it's Gamora before she knew Peter Quill. In fact, there's this part where Star-Lord's fighting. He sees Gamora and he says, "I thought I lost you." And Gamora knees him once in the gut, then knees him in the balls and drops him. He's like, "Oh, first one missed, the second one got him." And Gamora looks at Nebula's like, "This is the guy?" And Nebula goes, "Yeah, that's him." He's like, "He's it?" And when you see the Guardians formed up again, when they're getting ready to leave with Thor, Gamora's gone. She's off in the winds, and I think Guardians 3 is going to kind of hone in on that, because this Gamora is the Gamora from 2013, 2014. She did not know Peter Quill, even though Star-Lord is, completely in love with her. So that's going to be a thing. Nebula has joined up with them. And the reason how Thanos figures out is because of Nebula, because when Nebula goes back in time with War Machine to go get the stone before Peter Quill does, well, she automatically links up with the current year 2014 Nebula, and they're both sharing memories, and that's how Thanos figures out everything and all that. And because 2014 Nebula came to the future along with the time with Thanos' ship and all that, there's this point where Gamora's trying to talk down younger Nebula. She won't. Older Nebula shows up, is trying to talk her down, trying to say, "You don't have to be like this." Younger Nebula is about to shoot Gamora. Older Nebula blows younger Nebula away. But because it isn't like, you make a change from the past time, it instantly changes the future, so Nebula survives. Basically, her timeline has been saved. It's basically the idea of branching timelines and Back to the Future and all those timeline moves are problems. It's basically the branching. Like, basically, you can't change your time. Like, if you go back and change time, all you're doing is creating a parallel universe. And it's branching off you can't change your own time. All you can do is create offshoots. Like, once your past has happened, it is set in stone. You can't change it from your point of view. But anyways, that just wraps up Avengers. We see basically everyone. The only ones who are KIA right when the battle starts is, of course, Black Widow. Vision does not come back. Tony bites the dust also, which was very earned but very sad. Thanos is taken out. Captain America is retired. Thor, Hulk, and Hawkeye are pretty much the only Avengers left at this point, and we're off to the races for the next phase. But for me, this pretty much ended Avengers for me. Hope you guys liked my thoughts. Catch you next time.